All right. And it looks like we are live and good to go. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first book club of the year, which is weird to say because it's technically our second book club of the year.
Hmm.
But this is our first, what we call our first quarter, um, which we were reading a fiction book that was published after the year 2000. So, 21st century fiction, which sounds super sci fi. um, and reread The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So, before we get started with the conversation, I am just going to take care of a few housekeeping rules here. So, this is our quarterly book club, but we have two monthly clubs here at Dragonfly. We also have a monthly listening club, which we listen to Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. And we actually had that discussion last night. So you can go and find that and listen to our discussion. Um, we were all a little over the place, so it was a lot of fun.
It was
um,
fun.
we also have a monthly movie club that will be meeting this coming Monday. We watched The Dark Knight. For all of these clubs, we will be announcing our new picks on the 1st. Um, so, yeah, and actually, currently we have our uh, poll up for our next book club pick, which is going to be nonfiction about art. And if you would like to do any sort of nonfiction book, you can actually put that down as a suggestion or vote on one of the ones that's up. Um, I've provided a link to our Facebook group. We don't just have polls about books on there. We also That's where we do our announcements for what our next media picks are going to be. We also do a lot of other things, including like social meetups. We have a weekly phone call, both for just like creative support as well as a feedback call that we do on Monday nights. So people can come and show their artwork there and get feedback on it. Um, we do a lot of things. It's also just a nice Facebook group where you can post your art and get feedback and talk to other artists. And so, and if you like what we do and you'd like to support us, you can go to our Patreon. Right now, everything that we do is free and open to the public. We are looking into getting some perks, but you can support us for as little as $2 a month.
Because it's not free for us.
Yes. um, we're going to have some fun things coming through the pipeline on there. So you can get in before and find out all about it. Um, if you are watching this live, we can see the comments live and you can participate in the discussion that way. More likely, based on past things, you're watching it on the replay because you have other things to do on a Friday night at 7 p.m.
Pish posh.
I don't
Whatever.
understand what it is, but um, we try to keep up with the comments as they come in after the fact. It might take us a little bit longer, but I started these multimedia clubs because I like talking about media. So if you like any of our past picks or this pick and you want to talk about it, absolutely hit me up. Like, I want to hear your opinions. Um, well, without further ado, let's talk about The Night Circus, which is actually a book that Chris has been looking forward to discussing for a while. I'm gonna keep calling you out on that because you were like a very vocal, like,
I got the classics cover.
Nice.
yeah, I got the paperback,
It's paperback. It's just the
the classics cover.
vintage classics cover.
Yeah,
Okay, I have a hardback signed copy.
that's actually amazing.
Tell us more.
Was it signed when you bought it, or did you go to a signing?
I actually found a bookstore, I think, in Massachusetts that had, um, I guess, signed copies of her work, or you can pretty much like email them and hit them up and say, do you have any signed copies of such and such? And they'll get back to you and say, oh, she'll be in town in a couple of weeks. Wait, and then we'll send them to you.
Yeah, I know that like Pals has like a long-standing list of all of the authors that have come in to sign things.
Oh, Pal's
Um,
up in Portland.
yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah, huge fan of Pals. Um, they got a lot of cool stuff. If you're in Portland, you should check it out. It is the largest bookstore you've ever been in.
Yeah, and my family lives up there, so yeah, I hit up Pal's when I can.
Yeah. So clearly, Chris is a fan. Becca, did you enjoy reading the book?
Very much. Yeah, this book was like right up my alley. I think I've mentioned to on maybe one of the Saturday calls at some point that one of my favorite authors is Gregory Maguire, and the style is very similar, as well as my my focus in my lit degree is Victorian, so this is right up my alley.
Also, both Beckett and I, we know each other from circus, so
Yes, yeah. So this book was written for me.
um, one of
Nice
the
to see
main,
that you're wearing black and white with a red scarf.
Mm,
yeah,
yes, I didn't think of that.
this is gonna sound weird, but I often actually put on outfits specifically for our calls, but my camera doesn't angle properly, so I really just do it for myself, it turns out. um, but I'm glad you noticed because I did do that. Um, just as a note to anybody watching, we're going to have spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, you absolutely should go read it. If you are opposed to spoilers, come back after you read it.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I did. I did. I was like, I knew though, as soon as like I was like, oh, we're gonna have the call. I'm gonna have to wear black and red. um, I think one of the things that I mostly wanted to bring up with this book is the fact that it came from NaNoWriMo,
Yeah.
which I didn't know the first time I read it. And then the second time I kind of had it in mind, and because I wanted to like see how the story evolved and also like how it was written. For anybody out there, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, where you try to write a 50,000 word novel in
A
through
A
the
month.
month.
month of November. um, I've done it before. It is very intense and it is also draft zero. So I imagine this is nothing like what was finished at the end of it, but there's something very vignette about it.
Yeah, which is funny because I was thinking, because I knew that from talking about this book before this, meeting. I think it had been mentioned in one of our other calls that this was a NaNoWriMo project. And so I was thinking about that as I was reading it and could see how, that kind of is the case. It is kind of many vignettes put together, but also that's just how Victorian literature is. So it goes well with the whole like feel and theme of the book.
She didn't do this all in one NaNoWriMo. She completed it over like I want to say 4 NaNoWriMos,
Yeah.
Well, it
which
is
is kind of
quite
cheating.
long.
uh,
I'd wager that this is many more than 50,000 words.
yeah, I
Well,
actually
50,000 at least is
yeah.
what they consider.
She's actually very open about like her writing process and how the story came about, and she's like done a lot of things in regards to that. um and I think what she said it was that the first story had nothing to do with it, and it was like it didn't have a plot. So like the first NaNoWriMo was her like developing a kind of plot. She came up with the twins Poppet and Widget were the first characters, and then she struggled to come up with like a location for it, and so it did kind of come out in vignettes of like I imagine she actually did do them as like novels, but each one was a different iteration
Mm.
of the same novel as it grew, because the first one that she wrote, she didn't have a plot or anything. It was just vibes.
Yeah, it feels like all each of the lines that we follow in the book could have easily been written as separate novellas and then mashed together.
Yeah, because there are like 3 different storylines. You have like the romance that's going on. You also just have the circus in general. The circus is kind of its own character. And then you have Bailey and Poppet and Widget. That is almost an entirely separate story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the vast majority of this book takes place before Bailey is around.
That threw me off because the chapters were pretty much chronologically going along, and then they would jump ahead several years and then go right back, and that actually threw me off the first time I read it.
It's also like the only way that I could keep up with it is the age of the twins, because they'll go from being like toddlers to being like coherent children and then back, and then I think they're like teens by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love also that part of it takes place in the present. Like all of the second person chapters are all present tense right now. Well, the whole book is in present tense, but like,
Yeah.
I like that she did it that way because you can't tell when is when until you get to the end and it all comes together.
Yeah.
In present tense and also in second person in various points.
Yeah, they
Really
almost feel like little tiny hints in between like the chapters. Like they're almost like feel like they're irrelevant to the story, and then the last chapter takes place in the same time, and it doesn't specify the time specifically. It's just that like all of a sudden Bailey has an email address.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that actually was one of my favorite moments, was just finishing the book and it being like, oh, every time it said you going through this entire book, that was me. That was actually me going to the circus. So, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
I am curious what the circus is like in modern day, because the entire plot of the book is like, yeah, it's just Celia and Marco. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and after big spoiler right now, but like after they kind of move on and die, so to speak, and Poppin and Widget and Bailey take over, we'd have no idea what the circus becomes at that point.
Yeah, are they still able to operate as ghosts, because they made the circus and the entire circus was just built as them having a competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out.
Yeah, do you have a favorite part of the book?
I mean, I already said mine.
That's true, you did.
There's so many different areas of it. I mean, I really liked the different tents that Poppet and Widget would go through with Bailey. I thought Erin did a wonderful job of balancing the world, like the environment around that, the world building, and the character development.
Yeah,
just really draws you in.
Yeah. Do you guys have favorite characters?
I like the clockmaker.
That's completely fair. I'm actually partial to Isabel.
The fortune teller?
The fortune teller. Yeah.
Yeah, she's an interesting one. I like Poppet and Widget.
Yeah. I like the marmalade kittens that they get. No. Who I want to know what happens to them, because they can't take them to the circus because everything in the circus is black and white. So
really?
Well, and that makes you think, because they work with cats and their parents work with big cats.
Yes.
Are they all like snow leopards and like tigers, or like how I
They
don't did it ever.
actually did bring it up. They said
Oh,
like that's all like panthers and snow leopards.
huh.
So they are all black and white, and then specifically they describe like Poppet and Widget's cats as being stark white, like completely white. So it must be like very surreal to go into this place that's entirely just black and white.
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't know if you,
her descriptions are very visceral of what it looks like. Like I can see it in my head. Like the what was it, the wishing tree, or what was it called?
Yeah.
That
the
one.
wishing tree
And
with the candle.
yeah, and then the ice garden, like you can see it as she's describing it. It's
Yeah.
very
She's
beautiful.
very descriptive with like places, but conversations are very vague. And I thought that was really interesting because like a lot of times she's like they talked well into the night about art and this and that, or she'll tell you what the discussion was about instead of actually having the discussion.
Mm.
And it falls into the category of me being like, yeah, this wasn't an important conversation. Sometimes it actually is an important conversation, but you just having the knowledge of what it was about was what you needed. Where I'm just like, how did they get onto this topic? Like I'm genuinely curious how this conversation went, but you don't get it. So like a lot of the relationships between the people are described very vaguely.
Yeah, which and I have a habit of when I am very interested in something, I go and consume everything that there is about it. And I couldn't find a lot online about this book, which is surprising because it's very popular. I didn't check TikTok, but nobody on YouTube is really talking about it outside of like a few reviews from like book, like reading blogs or things like that. And it's like, no, that's not what I wanted. I don't want to know your opinion. I want to know analysis. And it wasn't satisfying. But a lot of what people said were they had some issues with that aspect of how the characters are kind of vague at times and how the dialogue isn't very fleshed out, and how the magic system doesn't make sense.
I would
Those are
agree with
people's
that.
top complaints.
The magic system does not make sense, but like I don't
Still
think
drew
that
you
was
in though.
yeah, I don't think that was the goal. It kind of
No.
added to the mystery of the whole thing. Like this is a magic that we'll never understand kind of
Right.
thing. I am fully convinced that Mr. AH is the devil. He has all of the criteria to meet for the devil in terms of like visualness. Like nobody can tell exactly where he's from. Like people try to figure out his like size often.
Hmm.
Like nobody remembers anything about him at all points in time, and just like the way that he operates, I'm like, oh, that's the devil.
Right. Do you cast do you cast characters when you read? You see like, okay, if I had a movie, this person would play that person.
No, I
No.
don't.
It helps me
I'm
to kind of visualize the character, so I do that.
I actually have the problem of I realize that I don't visualize a lot of it when I'm reading, and I don't know how that's possible. But like somebody would describe like how they visualize it in their head, and I was just like, I don't visualize books in my head. I don't know how that's possible. So I have seen like a lot of people do fan casts. I think that the reason why you haven't seen a lot of things about it online is because it kind of this book has been very popular for a very long time. It came out in 2011, which is kind of before TikTok, or and it's definitely before like booktube was really a thing as well.
Mm.
So I think when like everybody got in, it definitely falls into the category of the kind of books that would be discussed. But also I find that like book talk and booktube and bookstagram, you can just put a book in any social media. Is there one for Twitter?
Book.
Book. um they don't really go into like detailed analysis. They're kind of just like, I enjoyed this book. Here's the
Yeah,
plot.
Yeah.
That's fair. I have seen some really good booktubers who go into great detail, but I couldn't find any about this one. But all of them said they heard about it on TikTok, and that's why they wanted to read it.
Huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, despite the fact that you won't have that, do you have an idea about like what it is that you took from it? Like what's the general theme that you took from it?
I I mean, I think the theme is mystery. Like the entire thing is a mystery. Like you said, like we don't know how the magic works. We never learn really. Like we know that Celia can just do things with her mind for some reason.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, I can't think of names right now. The guy,
Marco. I said
Marco,
it
yeah.
and then I was like, was I correct?
Marco,
Which is
yeah, and
probably
he
on
has to.
par for his character, to be completely honest.
That's true. But like, and he like writes things down and he keeps a ledger, and there's like some convoluted like systems involving hair and spellbinding, but like they're not written in a language that anyone can understand. So
Yeah.
we never fully understand it. We never fully understand the two father characters. We never really fully understand what happened to Marco and Celia. Like this book is just a big mystery.
That's true.
What about you, Chris? What did you take from it or see the
I
theme at?
took it as being very fantasy, but pretty like romantic heavy. Kind of
Yeah.
pretty heavy in the romance, especially between Marco and Celia.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I guess I'm sorry, was it Isabel or
Yeah,
Marco?
Isabel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I lied a little bit. I did picture Marco sort of as uh what's his name? I'm not good with names today, apparently. um, um Legolas. Uh
Oh,
Ah,
all
uh
right.
what
yeah.
is his name?
Orlando
Legolas.
Bloom.
Orlando Bloom. Yeah, specifically from when he was in that fairy show.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly because he wears a bowler hat, and I was like, oh, that's Marco.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yep. Marco was the one person I couldn't get a beat on visually.
Which also was his entire deal. He
Yeah.
changed the way he looked so that he could fit in better with things.
That's true. That's true.
You wouldn't be able to recognize him anyway.
I think for me, the thing that I always felt like this book was about was fate. Like you have these two twins, one that can read the past and one that can see into the future. You have Isabel, who reads people's future and then constantly tells them that the future can be changed. And you have these two main characters who are literally spent their entire life trained to do one thing and then trying to get out of it. So I always and also Bailey's also doing that. He's being told by his family that he has to take over the farm, and then being told by his grandmother that he has to go to college and all he wants to do is go to the circus. So it's kind of about choosing your future and how you can make your own choices and decisions.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can see that, especially because in the resolution, we learn towards the end of the book that in order for the competition to be won in either direction, one of the two bound parties needs to die, and they refuse to do that. So
there's also an interesting parallel that I wish I knew more about, where the contortionist Sukiko also states that she was in love with her opponent.
yeah, she's also one of my favorite characters. Very mysterious. I wanted to know more about her for sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely like you find out at the end that she was the previous winner of the challenge. And then you can see all of the descriptions about her and all of the magic that she's been doing this entire goddamn time. Yeah, she's an
I like the
interesting
midnight
character.
dinners too.
Yeah, those were fun.
I need more midnight dinners in my life. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, because I don't really want to go anywhere at night. I'm not really a night person.
Oh,
I'm
I
very
figured you
solar
told him.
powered. I'm very solar powered, so I can't sleep when the sun's out, and that causes a problem with it.
Oh my gosh, I could totally be a part of this circus. I would adore it. I would love that. That would be the best life. It's very interesting. And back to briefly the point about what the circus might look like in the modern day. Like, evidently nobody ages because we still have the same people running it and involved. So does that include all of the like, I'm so curious. How does it work out?
Well,
Yeah,
the
they're all
twins
aging
were the only
slower.
ones who kept aging, at least in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine you need to reach maturity before. It would kind of
Or the
suck to
aging
be
stops.
it would
Yeah.
kind of suck to be infants forever. Yeah.
Yeah. One common thing that I heard from a lot of these reviewers is a distaste for the book. Like, they expected to like it, but they really didn't. Outside of a few of them were very like, I love this book. But I think definitely it's not for everyone. But if you like this book, then you should read Victorian Lit, because you would love it, like I do.
This book also has the problem of it's very talked about constantly. And so you can't live up. This happens with a lot of books. There are a lot of books that like can't live up to their expectation no matter what it is that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it before, so I went in fresh.
Which I feel like is the appropriate way to go into this book, because like from an analysis perspective, I don't think that there's like a super deep meaning. I pulled the meaning of fate from it, but it's still like it's more of an enjoyable vibe than it is like, let's sit down and think about our life choices. kind
Yeah.
of read.
Yeah, but one of the reviewers I listened to was like how there's this huge buildup in this competition and it's like a fight to the death and whatever, but then nothing happens. Like, it's so anticlimactic. And I was like, yeah, it's Victorian. That's the era.
It also is kind of climactic, though, in the sense of you have these two people who are building up towards this climax that they don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, that's true.
So also, I don't know what the because it's a game of stamina. So there's not really ever like it's not like they were going to fight it out. It's just that one of them was going to collapse at some point. So I
Yeah.
don't know what they were expecting to happen at the end, because it was never going to be a big, huge fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the impression that people got about that was because some descriptions of the book describe it in that way, that like it's a magical battle to the death and whatever. So they thought it was going to be like Harry Potter, like throwing
epic.
killing corpses. I don't know.
I don't know. This book is more of a romance to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very Victorian. It just
I think one of the things also that drew me to this book was that I don't know if either of you read or like Neil Gaiman. I felt like her writing style was very much like his, and I kind of needed to get away from, because I'm so like really just saturating myself with Neil Gaiman work, and I needed to find something separate.
Mm.
And then
yeah, it's kind of like ethereal and a little bit like there's a dark undertone that you can feel the entire through line of the book.
Yeah.
Like just kind of always lurking back there. One of my favorite parts was the story that Widget tells about the wizard in the tree,
Mm-hmm.
which is foreshadowing for the end.
Yes. I mean, time is cyclical. He's telling the past, if the future can be changed, the past can't be changed, but the past will be cyclical. I was trying to find this, but I like looked up a bunch of questions about it, and it was like it starts with a quote from Oscar Wilde, and I was like, I don't think mine does. Yeah, mine doesn't.
Yeah, no, it starts with the circus arrives without warning.
Yeah. I imagine it's like in the initial copy of it, and I wonder if Chris's has it, like instead of acknowledge like the dedication at the start, sometimes they have that little tag and it'll be like a
Yeah.
quote leading up to it. But I guess the initial quote is, "A dreamer is one who can only find his way by moonlight, and his punishment is that he sees the dawn before the rest of the world."
I do know there are a lot of quotes sprinkled throughout from various authors. Oh, I have that quote in part 1, Primordium.
So maybe I just didn't move.
Yeah, there's a
There
letter
it is
from
underneath.
Friedrich Thiessen and then Oscar Wilde.
I probably skipped over it briefly after reading the Friedrich Thiessen thing. I do that in video games as well, where I'm like, great, this is lore. Moving on.
Yeah, I love that part. That everything, all of Thiessen's like descriptions of the circus are like what caused people to become reviewers, and they're all like reading his not posts because he's not modern, but like his like letters that he writes about the circus and like falling in love with it before they even see it for themselves. And it's very it reminds me a lot of one of my favorite books of all time, which is Frankenstein, which is all told in letters.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that quote and just like how it relates to it. Of a dreamer is one who only finds his way by moonlight, and his punishment is that he sees dawn before the rest of the world. I'm like, who's seeing dawn before the rest of the world in this? Who's seeing? I guess only Poppet. She sees the future in the stars. So,
Yeah, well, and she predicts the future of the circus too, or lack thereof, depending.
Yeah.
But also Isabel can see into the future a little bit.
Which I want to know more about how her. So this is going to sound like the weirdest thing, but like I can read tarot, and if I know anything about tarot, you need your own deck, and the deck that you're using is important. And I was like, oh, she has her personal deck. She talks about it a lot, but she was given one from the circus to work for the circus, and I was just like, does her magic apply to that? Like, it's weird to me that they were like, you need to use our own specific thing.
Well, because there's a theme and you can't deviate from the theme. But so it doesn't sound weird at all. I also read tarot.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty decent at it. My preferred deck is the Morgan Greer deck. But you can read with practice, you can read on different decks. It just, they're going to speak to you in different ways. So
Yeah.
You have to like use them and get used to them. So
it's just like this interesting thing of having a world of magic and then putting such constraints on it, and the constraints not affecting the magic.
But the people running the circus don't know that it's magic.
It's true. They don't. Which, yeah, does go back to like, how does the magic system in this work? Because clearly magic is a thing, and it's kind of indiscriminate in how it works. Because it's not. Is what Isabel reads outside of the circus also magic?
I would
or is it just
think there's an
inside the
element to it. I
circus?
mean, knowing tarot myself, like tarot is not magic. It's just interpreting signs. But like she at a certain point in the book, it's revealed that she did cast some kind of spell over the circus.
Yeah.
So she must be using magic in her reading to an extent.
But she has no idea. So now we have 3 different forms of magic, which, if I remember correctly, Hector Bowen,
Yes,
last name,
the ghost dad.
the ghost dad, was a Mr. AH's disciple and had a disagreement with how essentially magic worked, and they started doing these to prove which form of it was better. And now you have a third person, but it kind of feels like it's nature versus nurture, because Marco's just given books and reads his way through without much instruction, and Hector only picked up his daughter because she already had innate skill that he was working on honing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think they're doing the same magic and are just approaching it from different ways, and Isabel just somehow got it through osmosis?
Well, I think okay, so now we're getting into the deep analysis. Um and this is just my own interpretation and kind of an insight a bit about how I see the world, the real world in general. I think that everyone is capable of magic. Like, it's just a matter of whether you know it or not. And so, Isabel tapping into whatever the source of magic is, whether she's aware or not of it, it is playing a role. Versus like Celia having such innate talent for it. That's because, I don't know, maybe because she was born of this guy who, was a very accomplished magic user.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it can also be studied and learned, as we see with Marco. So I think it's a matter of like, not so much some people have it and some people don't. It's we all have the ability. It's just how do you
Different
use
grades.
it? And yeah.
I think everybody has like a superpower that they're like the most mundane things. So like I am very good at doing things if it's very funny if I do it really well. And my best friend, I do not know how this is possible, but she always has a parking spot really close to the entrance of wherever we're going. So I do think everybody just like has a superpower, but they're all just so
Yeah.
mundane that you have no idea what they are.
I think it's whatever it is, tapping into the source of magic. Like, I think there is an equivalent in real life. I don't know what it is or I have a name for it, but it's definitely, I don't know. Nothing's impossible, but I don't think it's as powerful as it is in this book.
You don't think there's someone out there that's just going to make the Night Circus? I wish the Night Circus existed.
Yeah.
I had
Maybe it does, and I just go to sleep too early. And I don't live next to like a field.
I almost feel like it would be corrupted now in present day. Like there's some idiot's going to go in there and like, carve his initials on one of the benches or something like that and just be a real jerk.
And then Celia could just wipe it away with a flick of her hand. So
true.
Yeah, I want to know.
Wipe them away.
Now I'm very curious what kind of emails Bailey gets in the modern day as the proprietor of the Night Circus. Like, what's his email inbox look like?
I mean, they probably just get beamed right into his brain, right? He doesn't even have to read it.
I don't know. I think of like Bruce Almighty, where he makes it as an email.
Never saw that.
He gets the powers of God and just hears everybody's voices and turns it into an email system. So everybody's prayers come in as an email.
Yeah, because he gets overwhelmed with all the voices in his head.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. You should watch it.
This is actually an interesting question from this list of questions over here. But Isabel is very clearly a foil to Celia. But there's not really a secondary character for Marco.
Mm-mm.
Which is so from at Marco has to deal with like Isabel and Celia, and Isabel is the foil, but Celia's just kind of having her own internal struggle. She's not even dealing with her dad often.
Yeah.
Apparently,
After
apparently her
she,
dad just hangs out with Chandrish.
yeah, it seems that after he kind of like vaporizes himself and then the circus starts, he doesn't have a lot of input anymore. Like he chimes in from time to time just to tell her to stay away from Marco, but the rest of it is kind of he's very hands off.
Which is weird because Mr. AH that's his entire vibe is being hands off. So it's weird for him to be like, I have a differing style. Let me back off.
Well, his differing style is torturing his kid until she learns it on her own.
Yeah, he kind of physically abused her for a while, but I also think Marco was being emotionally abused. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a lot of that. I found that this book had a lot of interesting interpersonal dynamics because there was a lot of abuse going on, and not just of Celia and Marco when they were kids either. Like the Marco's gaslighting and abuse of Chandrish is horrifying. Like, and I think it's a very interesting character dynamic in that they come off as like real people, and there's even some things that happen where call Celia's character into question. Like she's not a perfect angel either. Like everybody has their faults, and they all seem very well-rounded, fleshed out, and like real people, and not like idealized, heroes of the story, I guess.
yeah, Celia definitely is kind of painted as like the golden child of this book a little. I do
Yeah,
want
but
Yeah, she
she's
to
really
not
has
perfect.
an
I do want to retract. I think my favorite character is Mr. Barris, who does his own magic, but also as like a physical thing, the engineer who doesn't show up often and like stops coming to the dinners and just kind of like came up with a plan for how to deal with his own immortality and to keep his business running and is
Honestly,
clearly just like making museums in the background.
I completely
oh yeah.
forgot about him until after one of the sisters died, and it was like, and then Mr. Barris, and I was like, who?
Yeah. Both Marco and Celia go to him and ask him to make him things, and he's just like, all right. You want a magical carousel? One coming right up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the carousel threw me a little bit in the description of how it operated.
Well, obviously, these things exist in the physical world and then are manipulated by, well, maybe it's not super obvious, but by Marco and Celia to do more than their physical aspect can do.
Yeah.
Whether it's actually doing that or it's by illusion is left up to the reader.
Right.
I don't know. As somebody who's done circus, were you analyzing how the circus is run and just like imagining it as an actual circus?
They didn't really talk about the acrobats that much, so no.
Other than they were above head, like you go
Other
under
than, oh
them.
yes, and the acrobat tent was the tallest one. That's really it. So
And the lion
The
and the
contortionist.
cats, the big cats.
They don't really talk about the big cats act. They
Yeah.
talk about the small
no.
cats.
Right.
Yeah, Poppin and Widget's parents aren't really mentioned outside of when she gives birth to them.
Right.
Yeah, so there is like a lot. You spend so much time in like the ice garden and even Widget's tent that's all memories.
Oh yeah,
Well, the
Cloud
labyrinth.
Labyrinth.
and
Oh,
yeah, the cloud maze.
I
I
wanna
really
I
like
wanna
that.
explore that so much.
And yet, like, we forget that there are tons of other tents that I kind of want to know what's in them.
Right.
Yeah.
So because the only other tents we see inside are Celia and Isabel's. And we know there's a big cat tent, which, how large is this circus?
Very, it seems. Because, if you're a part of a traveling circus, you also need like lodging for your performers. So,
That was also a part of Celia's magic. Was she was in charge of transporting it, which is really weird that nobody questioned how it was. They were just like, "It's a train," and like
right.
none of the people in charge of it were like, "Wait."
And that also made me think, is she transporting the train over the Atlantic Ocean? Like, how does this work?
Right.
Because they are international, so they have to get from continent to continent somehow.
I didn't take any of it into consideration really. I just went with the flow of just being drawn into this story. That's one thing
You read it like a normal person.
I have a literature degree. I can't do that.
I
I
have
have to analyze everything.
I have a husband who constantly asks really dumb but insightful questions about all forms of media, and now I've gotten into the habit of it. So,
See, I am the type who will notate all my books. So the only reason why this book isn't all marked up is because I got it after I already listened to the whole audiobook.
I started marking it because I wanted to hang on to things, and then I actually ended up taking them out because at some point, and this happens with all of my books, I will mark them for like the first 50 pages and then forget to mark the rest of the book.
I lost my annotated copy of Dracula on a set I worked on once on location. So there was no going back. It was just gone.
But
Oh,
imagine the person who's going to find that.
But I want it back.
I have a lot of used books, and it's always fascinating to me to like look and see what other people were writing in them. I have one that makes me very sad because it has a very heartfelt like dedication handwritten into the front cover of it, and I was like, I got
Aw.
this at a used bookstore. I feel really bad. um yeah, I did have like some things marked. I did pull up the top 3 quotes according to Kindle.
Hmm.
So, these are the things because when you're on Kindle, you can highlight things and it keeps track of things. And I kind of actively hate it because you'll be reading, it'll be like 3,000 people highlighted this line. And I'm like, well, this line is now clearly important. But these are the most highlighted lines from this book. So people see what they wish to see. And in most cases, what they are told that they see. That's fair. That's how optical illusions work and how illusions and magic work in the real world, like the magic tricks.
Yeah, well, and it's true. I mean, that's why memory is so unreliable.
Yeah. Um, yeah, people are prone to, I'm forgetting words. So I'm just going to stop with that thought. Um, we must put effort and energy into anything we wish to change. Again, that is very true. It's very hard to change. And I prefer to remain unenlightened to better appreciate the dark. Ignorant is bliss.
I don't think those last two are particularly profound. I like the first one.
there's one
Yeah.
that's stuck out to me. I actually wrote down, uh, and it's from Mr. H when he's talking. I think he's can't remember if he's talking with Marco or who he's talking with, but he says, "Good and evil are a great deal more complex than a princess and a dragon, or a wolf and a scarlet-clad little girl. And is not the dragon the hero of his own story? Is not the wolf simply acting as a wolf should act, though perhaps it is a singular wolf who goes to such lengths as to dress as a grandmother to toy with its prey?"
Yeah. That would be a much better thing to highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part stuck out to me too. And it's true. It's like, not to say that morality is relative, but depending on, culture and upbringing and background and things like that, like we all have different values. And I liked, like, there's a thought experiment about what an alien culture might value versus us and how widely that could differ and just completely out of the realm of our perception because, we are who we are. But yeah, it is like animals don't operate on a moral system. They have to eat, they have to sleep.
They work entirely on instinct, and I say that as somebody who spent my entire day today at an animal shelter.
But they also are capable of love and affection and, probably run a lot deeper than we give them credit for simply because we can't read their minds.
I think about this a lot, and humans make things very complex in and of themselves. Like there is like a morality thing that's very complex, but I think about these emotions a lot when it comes to like animals or, the storylines that, because I spend a lot of time with stories as well. And just like when you boil things down, it really just comes back to like fear or like security.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, but I mean, as we're discussing this, my my female cat was just laying on the ground and my male cat was laying in their cat donut that they have. And then he perked up, made a noise, and then walked over and started licking her on the face. Why? What was the motivation to do that? Like, I wish I could get into his head. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll never fully understand what
Now they're
anybody else is
wrestling,
thinking.
which is usually how these things go.
I get it.
But it was cute at first.
I would also fight someone if they came over and licked my face.
No, it always starts out lovely and they're because they groom each other and it's really nice. And then inevitably one of them gets mad and then they fight.
I mean, I never know what's going on in anybody's head, human, animal,
True.
tree. I have some very confusing plants that I'm trying to figure out. So also have no idea what they're thinking about.
Yeah, if I lived in this world and I couldn't be a performer in the Night Circus, I would most definitely be a reviewer. Review.
Review.
Yeah.
I really liked how it was kind of this little cult that they would just like, I guess like a bunch of deadheads just like going from place to place looking for.
I liked how we weren't introduced to them until close to the end. And they just kind of came up and sprung up out of nowhere, this whole like little group of brand new characters towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
That was fun. And they've just been following the circuits around for who knows how long.
But it's interesting that like they're never considered a part of the circus. In fact, like Celia is one and she pretends to not be herself when she is a review. But like Airtison made the clock, but doesn't feel like he's a part of the circus, despite a huge part of him is a part of the circus.
Well, because he was commissioned and paid, and that was the end of his role.
Yes. So like we're traveling through this circus, but the only time that we ever see like anybody in actuality is like when Bailey thinks he missed the circus. He thinks he's no longer a part of the circus, and this is the only way he can be a part of it is to follow it around.
Yeah, otherwise they are invisible.
Yeah. It's one thing I liked about Hertisen was I don't know if they gave an age to how old he was. I would guess to say he's, past middle age.
I think it may have been mentioned that he was in his 60s or something.
They list his date of birth at some point.
But
because they have a plaque for him.
Right.
He just seemed to, like, you could feel how young he was starting to feel whenever he would visit the circus. And just was so amazed by all of it. And
So he was born in 1846, and most of the book takes place between like 1886 and 1900. So he was like upper 40s, 50s.
Okay.
He was about the same age as Chandrish, actually.
So just about middle-aged. I thought he was
Yeah.
older.
Yeah, I kind of pictured him as like an older man, but that also might just be because I think of like clockmakers as older men.
Yeah.
So, interesting move though, making Marco murder him.
Yeah.
Maybe actually, I brought up like Isabel is Celia's foil. Maybe Airtison might be Marco's.
Well, man, Marco didn't
Well, it
kill.
was Chandrish who
was-
murdered him, and it was
Yeah.
because of
Yes.
the lifting of Isabel's
Oh.
charm. So I don't think he meant to do, like, I do think, indirectly Marco is responsible because he drove him mad, and
Right.
that ended up being what drove him to murder. But I don't think he meant to do any of that.
No, but I mean, like, they handed him everything at the end of it. And so it's just Marco standing there with like the knife that was used to murder a man, and nobody talks about it ever again.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like Chandrish faced any consequences for that.
Nobody faced any consequences for Airtison's death.
Yeah, no.
And a part of me wonders if that was just Marco doing that. Like, Marco was like, let's not talk about this ever again.
Probably.
I mean, he's been
You
manipulating.
didn't see anything.
He's been manipulating Chandris this entire time. Their conversation in like his office is like one of the weirdest, like tensest and confusing scenes in this entire book.
So uncomfortable. Yeah,
When
it's
Chandrish
like,
is digging through his stuff.
Yeah, of just like, you're gonna go drink and none of this will have ever happened. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
That was
very uncomfy.
I think that's like really the first time that you really see like Marco's true colors.
I wasn't sure how much of that was his true colors or if he was.
I think he was more motivated by protecting the circus at all costs, no matter what happened out of that.
But in order, like, Chandrish had been having like memory problems. So, and it kind of struck me as like not the first time Marco's been having this conversation with him.
It was because Marco was manipulating his memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like erasing memories and implanting memories. And I don't think that his motivation for that was malicious, but it is icky. Like, you shouldn't do that. Bad, Marco. Shame on you.
Yeah. I think it's icky. It's very icky.
Yeah, it's abuse.
Well, as much as, cutting your daughter's fingers over and over again.
Yeah, this book has a lot of abuse in it. and not to like, yeah, I don't know. I am sympathetic to Marco and Celia as a couple. However, Marco is kind of an iffy guy. I don't know what I think about him ultimately, because also, he did the same thing to Isabel to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been manipulating people this entire time. His entire form of magic is manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And Celia's is illusion. So maybe that's why we view her as like the golden child of it.
Well,
she was
and
able to maintain her illusion this entire time.
I also think like towards the end, as she's growing wearier from the extent and the length of how long this has been going on and all of the different facets that she has to keep in control constantly, she does start to let things slip. And we see that Poppet says towards the end of the book how, everything's falling apart and she can't get Celia's attention. Like, she's not able to confide with her about anything. And, or if she does, she's not paying attention. Like, she just dismisses it. So it's like, we kind of start to see her mask crack a little bit there.
I think it's interesting because I kind of just talked myself into a secondary meaning of something to take from this, because this entire book is illusion versus manipulation, and which one of those things is going to crack first.
Mm.
Huh.
Which makes
Because
me very curious about Tsukiko's battle with her counterpart.
with her counterpart who ended up as a pile of ash in Kyoto, I also want to know more about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think she says at one point that her rival committed suicide.
Well, because one
Did
of
it to
them has to
herself.
die, and that's what
Mhm.
she's trying to help Marco to do at the end.
Yeah, she
Is
wants Marco to die because
well,
Celia.
he
I think
wants to
that
take
she's
himself.
manipulation.
I think he wants to take himself off the board so that she can be the survivor.
Tsukiko wanted Marco off the board because she thought that the circus could survive without Marco, but it can't survive without Celia. And if
Mm.
one of them has to die, then he was the easier one to lose, which makes me feel like Tsukiko and then therefore AH are all just manipulation. Tsukiko also kind of made the circus in the first place. She just showed up at a dinner party in the middle of the night and was like, "You guys are going to make a circus."
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, I think it's kind of manipulation versus illusion. Which side do you choose?
Mm. But not all of Celia's feats of magic are illusory. Like she is able to actually heal herself and to some extent possibly other people, maybe.
Yeah, sometimes she's good with the doves she knows. She's good with people that she knows immensely. Um,
Oh,
but we
it's a
are
cat.
past an hour now.
Oh, I could
So
just keep going.
I
Oh yeah.
know. So I do have to start closing this down.
Okay.
Is there anything that you absolutely have to get out before we leave for the evening?
I would be very curious. I mean, and just since we're talking about Erin Morgenstern's work, uh, I did read The Starless Sea, and it was just frustrating as all. So uh, don't go to don't go reading that thinking you're going to see read the Night Circus Part 2.
Interesting, because people say that they tend to like that one better than this one.
Really.
It is hard to get a grasp on. It is a story about stories, but you are not a part of the main story.
And it would just go
So
in all different directions.
yeah, it's a little bit hard to get a grasp on.
Hmm.
Um, it was I read it, and like at the end of it, I hated reading it until I got to the very end of it, and then it clicked in my brain, and I was like, oh, and then I liked it a lot more. But yeah, it's a much different book than this. Um, and it is a lot tougher to get into. I will say that.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. But I am very curious what I don't know if she's working on something currently or if she has any plans to come up with something in the future, but her storytelling is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I am excited to see where she goes with it.
They are in pre-production on a film for this, but it's been in pre-production for years, so who knows
Yeah.
what's happening.
I did look in on that because a lot of times with books, people buy the IPs just so nobody else can own the IP. But this one seems like it might be a COVID problem because they actually got they got a bunch of the team in, but in 2019.
Mhm.
So I think that there is still hope for it. I imagine production got caught up because we had COVID and then we had all of the strikes.
Strikes. Yeah.
Yeah. Hoping they don't make it into a movie and is a series, put it as a series instead.
I usually think that way about most things. I
This
think
would
most
make
things
a
would be
good
better as a
series. Yeah.
series.
I like it when it's longer.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, unless anybody else has anything left to say.
Yep.
I'm gonna
I
end this room.
pictured one last observation. I pictured the ghost dad. What was his name?
Hector.
Hector.
Bowen.
Yes,
Hector Bowen.
Bowen. That's right. As sort of like the ringleader from Moulin Rouge. That's kind of how I pictured him.
I saw Robert Downey Jr.
Really?
Yeah.
Totally different.
And Anthony Hopkins as Mr. H.
Yeah. No, to me, he was just a frail old man. Typically, I don't like cast people. I just let my brain come up with something.
All right. I will have to think about who I would cast, and then we can all discuss what it is when they finally announce who it is that is getting casted.
And then we all go, no, they're wrong.
Horrible choice.
I do not accept this. But thank you all for joining me tonight.
This was
Thank
fun.
you, Beckett.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And I hope everybody has a lovely evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.